Hey guys, tonight we slip quietly into the long shadows of Tudor England, where candlelight flickers on cold stone walls, and the corridors carry whispers too dangerous to speak aloud. You are in the heart of a palace where every step feels measured, every glance carries weight, and every word is a thread in a dangerous tapestry of power. Beyond the heavy wooden doors, somewhere far from your young ears, politics twists and turns like a serpent. But in your world, Elizabeth's world, the air is still, save for the faint scratch of quills, the rustle of servants' skirts, and the muffled thud of boots pacing in distant chambers. You're about to discover a truth that could shatter the fragile order you've known since you could walk. And if you lived in these times, you probably wouldn't survive the weight of it. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And I'd love for you to drop your location and local time in the comments, so I know exactly where in the world you're listening from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You are Elizabeth, barely 3 years old, with hair the pale copper of the dawn and eyes sharp with curiosity. You don't remember your mother's face in detail, only fleeting impressions, the swish of velvet skirts, the scent of rosewater clinging to a gown, the shadow of a smile that never quite reached her eyes. The adults speak of her less and less now, as if silence could erase her from memory. You've noticed this even if they think you're too young to understand. The truth is, the palace feels different lately. Colder. Not in temperature, though the drafts still slip under the doors, but in spirit. There's a tension that clings to the servants, a stiffness in the way they curtsy, the way they avoid your gaze. Sir Henry, your tutor has begun to correct you gently when you mention her name. He never says Anne or Mother. He just moves the lesson forward, his eyes darting toward the door, as though someone might overhear. The absence of her presence is everywhere. Her apartments are closed, the windows shuttered, the bright tapestries you once admired taken down. It's as though the very air in those rooms has been locked away. You're told you cannot enter, that they are being prepared for someone else. You don't yet know that someone else will become a shadow over your entire childhood. You still receive gifts, embroidered handkerchiefs, carved toys, but they come from your father, King Henry, whose affections shift like the wind. One day he kisses your hair and calls you his little Bess. The next, he barely acknowledges you. You've seen him look at you in ways you can't quite read, pride maybe, or perhaps something more distant, as if weighing you against something else entirely. And then one morning you hear it. You aren't meant to. You're in the corner of the great hall, half hidden behind a tapestry, while playing with a small wooden horse. The servants are speaking in low voices, but their whispers carry through the stillness. You catch only fragments at first, tower trial, treason words that mean nothing to you yet. But then one says it plainly, not realizing you are listening. She has been condemned. You don't know what condemned means, but the way the woman's voice trembles, the way the man beside her mutters a quick "God have mercy," plants a seed of unease in you. You peek around the edge of the tapestry, and the woman's face drains of color when she sees you. She hurries over, kneeling so her face is level with yours. "Come now, princess," she says too quickly. "Time for your lessons." She takes your hand and guides you away, her grip just a shade too tight. Days pass, but the whispers grow. You overhear the guards talking when they think you're asleep. They say she is in the Tower of London, that the trial was swift, that the king himself signed the order. You do not understand the details, but you understand enough to know it's about your mother. And you feel deep in your small chest a fear you cannot name. The day itself dawns strangely bright. You are kept indoors, away from the windows. Your nurse distracts you with a new doll, but she keeps glanced at the door as though waiting for news. At some point, she excuses herself, leaving you in the care of a servant you barely know. The hours stretch, and then, though you will only piece this together much later, the sword falls. Not the axe, not the rough, messy end reserved for most. A French executioner, swift and skilled, has been brought for this day. But in your moment in the hush of that chamber, all you know is the sudden stillness, as though the entire palace has exhaled and is holding its breath. No one comes to tell you. No one dares. Yet children have a way of sensing things without words. You feel it in the way the sunlight seems harsher, in the way footsteps echo down the corridors. Something final has happened. That night, you dream of a garden of a woman in a gown the color of wine, her hair dark against her pale skin. She bends to kiss your forehead, and when you look up, she is already fading. You wake with tears on your cheeks, though you don't understand why. From that day forward, her name becomes a ghost. You will grow into a young woman under the shadow of that absence, learning to navigate a court where memory itself can be treason. And somewhere in the quiet corners of your mind, the unanswered question will linger, why did my mother have to die? And so begins the slow gathering of pieces, the whispered clues, the moments when truth tries to push through the walls of silence around you. The first cracks in the wall of silence come not from the courtiers or the servants, but from the books. You are still very young when you discover the small alcove in the palace library, a place where the air smells of vellum and dust, where the light from the narrow windows falls in slanted bars across the floor. At first you choose the books with the most elaborate illuminations, bright flowers twining around the margins, golden initials shining like captured sunlight. But over time you learn to look at the text itself, even if you don't yet understand all the words. One afternoon you find a volume left open on a desk. The handwriting is precise, the ink still sharp and dark. You sound out the words slowly, like a puzzle, until you reach a name you recognize. Anne Boleyn. It jumps from the page like a spark. Your heart gives a quick, almost painful leap. The sentence is stiff, formal, something about charges, about treason, but you do not yet know what treason means. You trace the letters with a fingertip as though touching her name could bring her closer. You tuck the memory away. You've already learned that asking too many questions can earn you the kind of silence that feels like a door slamming. But you begin to notice things in the conversations around you. Courtiers who speak her name in a lowered voice as though the syllables themselves might summon danger. The way your father's mood darkens if anyone mentions the past, his past. Your half-sister Mary is older, sharp-eyed, with a presence that can cut as deep as any blade. She does not speak to you of your mother. In fact, she hardly speaks to you at all, unless it's to correct your manners or remind you of your place. But there's a flicker in her gaze, sometimes a mix of pity and calculation, that tells you she knows more than she will ever share. Time moves strangely for a child in court. Days stretch endlessly, with lessons in languages, music, scripture. You learn to keep your face smooth when the other children speak of their mothers, to nod politely and change the subject. Inside, though, you begin building a kind of secret ledger, keeping track of the small details people let slip when they think you aren't listening. The first truly dangerous piece of information comes from an unexpected place. A visiting lady from the Howard family, your mother's kin. You are sitting together during a feast, the hall alive with music and the clatter of trenchers. She leans close, her breath warm against your ear, and says, "You have her eyes, child." It's a kind remark, but you see the way she glances around afterward, as if to check who might have heard. Later, when she passes you a sweetmeat, she slips in a fragment of truth as casually as one might comment on the weather. Your mother was wronged. It's the first time anyone has suggested that what happened was not simply inevitable. The words lodge in your mind, stubborn and sharp-edged. Wronged. Wronged by whom, and how you carry that seed with you into adolescence when the world begins to expand, and so does your understanding of its dangers. Your tutors, careful, loyal men appointed by your father, avoid discussing politics, but history lessons have a way of brushing up against the present. When you study the reigns of former kings and queens, you start to notice patterns, the way power shifts, the way marriages can become weapons, the way accusation can be as deadly as any sword. It is not until you are about 10 that you begin to suspect the full shape of the truth. You overhear it, as you so often do when adults think you are out of earshot. This time, it is two older men speaking in the chapel after Mass. Their voices are low, but not low enough. Never should have been put to it. Evidence was thin as frost. Thin or not, the king would have it so, and that was that. Aye, but to kill the queen, his own wife, the mother of, the man cuts himself off as someone else enters the chapel. You sit frozen in your pew, the Latin prayers still drifting in the air like smoke. Kill. It is the first time you have heard it plainly. All the whispers, all the silences, all the evasions have circled this one brutal fact. In the weeks that follow, you test the boundaries of what you can ask. You drop her name in conversation with your governess, watching her eyes for any flicker of reaction. You ask about the Tower of London, about why people are sent there. Sometimes you get vague answers for the good of the realm, because they have broken the king's law, but never the whole story. Still, even fragments are enough for you to weave into a rough tapestry. You begin to understand that your mother's death was not an accident nor a natural passing, but a deliberate act carried out under the king's command. And that king is your father. The knowledge is like ice in your veins. It forces you to see the world differently, to understand that love and loyalty at court are as shifting and fragile as the light on water. You also begin to sense in a way beyond your years that knowing too much could be dangerous. You've seen what happens to those who speak carelessly, the sudden absence of a familiar face at court, the rumors that follow the quiet erasure of their memory. You learn to keep your questions hidden behind polite smiles, to tuck your truths away where no one can use them against you. But the knowledge changes you. It makes you cautious, yes, but also determined. If you cannot trust others to tell you the truth, you will find it yourself, piece by careful piece. You will listen, you will watch, and you will remember. Because somewhere beneath the layers of fear and loyalty and silence, there is a story that belongs to you. And whether you are ready or not, the court will one day force you to choose what to do with it. The years between childhood and young womanhood pass in a blur of careful steps and measured speech. By now you have learned that survival in your father's court is not about strength alone, but about reading the room, the twitch of an eyebrow, the pause before a reply, the way laughter can be genuine one day and a trap the next. You are Elizabeth, daughter of a queen whose name is barely spoken, and every day you carry that invisible weight. You are 13 when the court moves to Greenwich for the spring season. The palace is alive with the smell of fresh rushes underfoot, the chatter of attendants, the river glinting just beyond the walls. You are assigned a chamber that overlooks the gardens, a quiet corner where the noise of the court is muffled to a faint hum. It is here, in this relative solitude, that the next piece of your mother's story comes to you unexpected, unguarded. One morning, your music master is delayed. You wait in the practice room, fingers idly tracing the strings of the lute. Voices drift through the open window from the courtyard below. Two laundresses are speaking as they hang linens in the pale sunlight. Their words are casual at first about weather and wages, but then one lowers her voice and says, "They say she was brave at the end, stood tall as any soldier." The other nods, shaking out a sheet. Didn't even cry, just knelt and prayed. You freeze the sound of their voices wrapping around you like cold air. You know they mean her. No other she in your mind could carry that kind of weight. You lean forward slightly, catching every word. The Frenchman made it quick, said she kept looking to the heavens. Ay, poor soul. And that little girl left behind. The rest is lost to a sudden gust of wind. But you have heard enough. Brave at the end, looking to the heavens. The image burns into your mind, your mother facing her death, without tears, without collapse. Not a traitor, not a shadowy figure from whispered accusations, but a woman of strength. That night, you lie awake in your chamber, the moonlight casting silver bars across the bed. You try to imagine her voice, her face, the feel of her hand in yours. And for the first time, you wonder if her strength is something that lives in you as well. As you grow older, the court begins to see you differently. You are no longer the small girl in bright gowns trailing after her nurse. You are tall, sharp-featured, quick with languages, and quicker still with your wit. Some smile at this, others do not. The king is pleased when your learning reflects well on him, but you can sense his wariness too, as though your mind might one day turn against him. It is during this time that you begin to collect allies, not in the overt, dangerous way of plotting, but in the quieter sense of those who will speak to you honestly, if only in private. One of them is Lady Bryan, your former governess, who has known you since you were small. She never speaks directly of your mother, but one evening, as she adjusts the clasp of your gown before a banquet, she murmurs, "You have her spirit. Guard it well." She does not meet your eyes when she says it, and you know better than to press her for more. Still, the words feed the fire of your curiosity. You start to see the court not just as a place of ceremony and duty, but as a vast, intricate web of loyalties, betrayals, and half-truths. You notice how quickly favor can turn, how one wrong word can send a nobleman to the tower. And you begin to understand with a chill that settles deep in your bones that your mother's fate was not an isolated tragedy. It was part of this system, this machinery of power. You tread carefully. You smile at the right people, laugh at the right moments, keep your opinions folded neatly away like letters in a locked chest. But your mind is always turning, always reaching back to the fragments you've gathered, wronged brave at the end, evidence thin as frost. They do not yet form a complete picture, but they are enough to know that the official story is not the true one. And then one evening in the great hall, you catch sight of a man you do not recognize. He is older, with a lean face and eyes that seem to weigh everything they see. He lingers near the musicians, speaking little, watching much. Later, you learn that he once served in the tower years ago. The thought makes your heart beat faster. Was he there? Could he have seen her? You find a moment to speak to him under the pretense of thanking him for delivering a message from another courtier. His voice is low, his words careful, but when you mention your mother's name, he does not flinch. Instead, he says, "She met her end with grace, my lady. More than many I've seen. It is such a small thing, that sentence. But it is the first time someone outside your family has looked you in the eye and spoken of her without fear. You carry it with you for weeks, a talisman against the unspoken hostility of the court. And you begin to realize that piece by piece the story is revealing itself not through proclamations or official accounts, but through the quiet courage of those willing to remember. Somewhere deep inside you make a silent vow one day you will know the whole truth. By the time you turn 14, the shape of your world has sharpened into something both familiar and treacherous. You know the patterns now, the rhythm of the court, the way news spreads in hushed murmurs before it's ever spoken aloud in the council chamber. You've learned that the truth rarely arrives in full, but instead in shards, each one sharp enough to cut if you're not careful in how you handle it. Your father's presence looms larger than ever, even when he is not in the room. You've grown used to watching his moods change like the tides, knowing when to speak and when to simply bow your head. His affection is unpredictable. Some days he calls you his clever girl and praises your studies, and others he barely acknowledges you. But one thing is constant, he never speaks of your mother. Not a word. It is during a quiet afternoon in the royal chapel that another fragment of the past finds you. You've stayed behind after the service, lingering in a pew near the back as the courtiers drift away. The air is cool, heavy with the scent of beeswax and incense. You hear soft footsteps behind you and turn to see the chaplain, an older man with kind, steady eyes. He hesitates for a moment, as though weighing something, and then sits beside you. "My lady," he begins, voice low, "I knew your mother well. She had a heart that burned for God's truth." His gaze drifts toward the altar, his voice almost a whisper. "And she died clinging to it." Your breath catches. This is the first time anyone has spoken to you so directly about her faith. You want to ask more. What did she say in her final moments? Did she send you a blessing? But you can feel the walls of caution rising around you. Instead, you nod, and he places a hand gently over yours. "Hold fast to what is right, even when the world tells you otherwise," he says. And then, as if realizing he's said too much, he stands and walks away. His words leave an ache in you. They also leave questions. What truth did she cling to? Was it about her innocence, her marriage, something greater? And why would such a truth demand her life? That night you sit at your writing desk, the quill trembling slightly in your hand. You begin to record the fragments you've gathered over the years, not names or details that could endanger you, but impressions, moments, phrases. Wronged, brave at the end, thin as frost, heart that burned for God's truth. You keep the parchment hidden beneath a false bottom in the desk drawer. If anyone found it, you could claim it was nothing more than practice for your penmanship. But to you, it is a ledger of the truth taking shape. Court life, as always, offers little space for private thought. That winter you attend more banquets, more dances, more tedious ceremonies. You play your part smiling at foreign ambassadors answering questions in flawless Latin or French when called upon. You watch the king charm and intimidate in equal measure, and you wonder if he sees in you traces of the woman he destroyed, or if he has trained himself never to look for them. The whispers about your mother's death never entirely fade, though they grow fainter in the great roar of politics. Once at a feast, you hear two lords debating whether France or Spain should be courted for alliance, and in the middle of it one says, almost idly, "Henry has never feared cutting down what stands in his way." The other glances sharply toward you and changes the subject. You keep your expression still, but the words settle in your stomach like stones. It is early spring, when you are given leave to visit Hatfield, away from the suffocating closeness of court. The countryside air is different, brighter, freer, and the rhythm of the household is gentler here. You spend your mornings riding, your afternoons in study, your evenings reading by the fire. It is here, in the quieter halls of Hatfield, that you finally speak your mother's name aloud to someone without fear. Your companion is Cat Ashley, your governess and friend, a woman whose loyalty has been your constant shield. One evening, as rain patters softly against the windows, you ask her, "What was she like?" Cat hesitates, setting aside her sewing. "She was quick of mind, quick of tongue, and she loved you fiercely," she says at last. "You were the light of her eyes." She swallows, glancing toward the door, as if to be sure you're alone. She was not what they said she was, Bess. Not in her heart, nor in her actions. The words strike something deep in you. You've always suspected as much, but hearing them from Cat, spoken with quiet certainty, feels like a door unlocking in your mind. That night, you cannot sleep. You lie awake, listening to the wind sighing through the eaves, and think about the woman who held you, who smiled at you, who died with her eyes lifted to the heavens. You think about the man who ordered it done, and the court that allowed it to happen. And you think about the kind of daughter you must become in a world that tried to erase her. It is in that sleepless stretch of hours that your determination hardens. One day you will uncover the whole truth. One day you will make the world remember her name. And as you drift at last into a restless sleep, you do not yet realize how soon the chance to prove your resolve will come. When you return to court from Hatfield, you carry with you more than your trunks and riding boots. You carry the quiet conviction planted by Cat Ashley's words. It is not the fierce, reckless determination of a child, but the steady resolve of someone learning to navigate a world where a single misstep can mean ruin. You know that every question you ask must be wrapped in silk, every glance calculated, every truth gathered like a precious jewel to be hidden away until the right moment. The court is as you left it, brimming with movement, and murmurs alive with the sound of boots striking the flagstones, courtiers exchanging pleasantries that conceal sharpened edges. Foreign ambassadors sweep through the halls in their jewel-toned doublets, and musicians play in alcoves to mask the undercurrent of scheming. You take it all in with the sharpened senses you've developed over the years, knowing now that the truth about your mother is not just a family matter, it is tangled in the roots of the kingdom itself. It is during a supper in the smaller hall, more intimate than the grand feasts, that another fragment reaches you. Seated beside you is a man of letters from the Low Countries, invited for his knowledge of theology and law. He is genial, unassuming, and perhaps less careful than he ought to be. As the courses pass, spiced pottage, roasted pheasant, candied fruits, he leans closer to you and remarks on the fickle nature of justice in monarchies. A crown can condemn without proof, he says softly. I saw it here years ago when a queen lost her head while the evidence could have been carried in a thimble. He does not say her name, but he does not need to. The words send a rush of heat to your cheeks, though you keep your face composed. You glance toward your father at the high table, laughing with one of his advisors, and you wonder if he heard. But the king's attention is elsewhere, and the moment passes without notice except by you. That night, you write the words, "Evidence could have been carried in a thimble," in your hidden ledger. You have begun to notice how these fragments are not random. They align, reinforcing each other, forming a pattern so clear in your mind that it's hard to believe others do not see it. The pattern sharpens further when you overhear a conversation between two noble women in the Queen's apartments. The current Queen, Catherine Parr, is away at prayer, leaving the ladies in waiting to chatter among themselves. You are sitting in the window seat with a book. Your posture perfect, your eyes lowered so they think you are not listening. One says she faced the sword without trembling, they say, made even the headsman weep. The other shakes her head, and yet they called her guilty, the headsman. You had always imagined a faceless executioner, a shadow in the tower courtyard. But the idea of him weeping of your mother's courage, breaking through even the hardened heart of the man tasked with ending her life, gives you something you did not expect: pride. In the weeks that follow, you begin to weave her into your own identity, not the scandal the court whispers about, but the woman of intellect, courage, and dignity. You learn more about her skill in music, her quick mind, her ability to charm and debate with ambassadors. You see pieces of yourself in those descriptions, and it strengthens you. But pride is dangerous here. You cannot let it show too plainly. You wear it beneath the surface like a fine garment hidden under plain wool. Outwardly, you continue as the obedient daughter of the king, attending lessons, reciting your psalms, speaking when spoken to. Inwardly, you are shaping yourself into someone who will not only survive but endure, and perhaps in time prevail. It is Catherine Parr who perhaps unknowingly gives you the greatest opening yet. She is warm to you in a way none of your father's other wives have been speaking to you, not as a pawn in royal politics, but as a young woman with a mind worth cultivating. One afternoon, she invites you to her private chambers to discuss a passage from Erasmus. As you speak of truth and conscience, she regards you with a knowing look and says, "Sometimes the truth is dangerous, not because it is false, but because it is true." You wonder if she is speaking about herself, about your father, or about your mother, perhaps all three. That night, you cannot shake the sense that she knows more than she will say. You begin to watch her closely, noting the way she navigates your father's tempers, how she speaks plainly when he is pleased, but veils her thoughts when his brow darkens. You realize this is a skill you must master, not the art of deceit for its own sake, but the art of survival in a world where truth can be fatal. By now, the story of your mother's death is no longer just whispers and shadows. It is a nearly complete mosaic, the missing pieces few enough that you can see the whole image even without them. You know she was accused falsely. You know she met her death with courage. You know your father ordered it and that the court let it happen. And you know with the certainty of someone who has been shaped by absence that her story is now yours to carry until the day you can speak it aloud without fear. That day feels far away, but you can already feel the pull of it somewhere on the horizon, drawing you forward. The summer you turn 15 is hotter than you can remember. The air inside the palace feels heavy, thick with the scent of warmed stone and the faint tang of rushes that have lain too long underfoot. The court moves restlessly through its routines, seeking shade in the gardens, lingering longer in the coolness of the chapel. But the tension beneath the surface is as taut as ever. You have grown skilled at feeling that tension, the way one can sense a storm in the air before the clouds roll in. Your father's health is beginning to falter. The courtiers never speak of it openly, but you can see it, the stiffness in his gait, the way he leans more heavily on his cane, the lines etched deeper into his face. These changes make him no less dangerous. In some ways, they make him more so. The king, knowing his reign is entering its final chapters, guards his authority like a lion protecting the last of its strength. You have learned enough to know that when power begins to slip, suspicion and cruelty often follow. It is during this sweltering summer that you are summoned to a gathering in the Queen's private apartments. Catherine Parr has invited a small circle of ladies to read aloud from Scripture and discuss its meaning. This in itself is nothing unusual. She is known for her piety and her learning. But the tone of the gathering is different tonight. You notice it as soon as you step into the room, the lowered voices, the deliberate way the doors are closed, the glances exchanged between the women. The reading that evening is from the Gospel of John. And ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. Catherine's voice is calm, but her eyes search the room as she speaks. Then she asks each woman to share what the verse means to her. When it is your turn, you choose your words with care. That truth is worth seeking, you say, even when the world tries to hide it. Catherine's gaze lingers on you a moment longer than is comfortable. She does not smile, but she nods slowly, as though filing your answer away for some future moment. After the reading, when the others have drifted into quieter conversation, she beckons you to her side. Elizabeth, she says, her voice barely above a whisper. You must understand that truth in this world is rarely given freely. It must be taken and guarded. She does not elaborate, but you can feel the weight of her words settling into you like a stone dropped into deep water. A week later, the court receives visitors from France. Among their retinue is an aging courtier with sharp eyes and a sharper memory. You are introduced briefly at a reception, the air thick with the scent of roses and the sound of lutes. When he hears your name, something flickers in his expression, recognition perhaps, or regret. Later that evening, he finds you in a quieter corridor and bows deeply. I was in London, he says in careful English, on the day your mother died. The Frenchman who struck the blow was my cousin. Your breath catches, but you do not speak. You know better than to reveal too much eagerness. He told me, the man continues, that she never faltered, that her words were of God and for you. He looks at you then as though deciding whether to say more. But those words, he says, finally are not for every ear. They belong to you alone. He will not give them to you that night. Instead, he promises to send a letter through a safe hand before he returns to France. And in the days that follow, you live with the tension of waiting the question of whether the letter will come at all. When it does, it is small enough to be hidden inside the palm of your hand. The seal bears no crest, only a simple knot of wax. You take it to your chamber, close the door, and break it open. The letter is brief, only a few lines written in a slanted hand. To my daughter, I pray God save you from the malice of this world. Keep your conscience and remember me not as I died, but as I lived. It is signed simply, Anne. You read it again and again until the words blur. It is the closest you have ever come to hearing her voice. The paper smells faintly of lavender, though you know it is only your imagination. You fold it carefully, slip it between the pages of a small prayer book, and hide it in the false bottom of your desk, alongside your growing ledger of truths. That night, you cannot sleep. You lie in the darkness, hearing the muffled sounds of the palace settling for the night. The clink of a guard's armor, the rustle of rushes under a servant's hurried feet. And you think about her words. Not as I died, but as I lived. You realize that you have been collecting the story of her death for years. But now for the first time you feel the pull to understand her life. And in that moment, you make yourself another vow. You will not let the court's version of Anne Boleyn be the only one that survives. Autumn arrives crisp and sharp, and with it comes a shift in the air at court. The feasts grow richer, the colors of the tapestries deeper yet beneath the layers of pageantry. There is a stirring whispers of alliances, forming of enemies, moving in the shadows. You have learned to read these changes like the turning of seasons, and you keep your face still while your mind takes note of every ripple. Your father's health worsens, and the court becomes a place of careful positioning. The great families hover like hawks, angling for influence over what comes next. For you, this is both an opportunity and a danger. You are no longer the child in the corner, overlooked and underestimated. Your education, your poise, and your quick mind have begun to draw attention, sometimes the wrong kind. You tread with even greater care now, knowing that every word you speak might be remembered when the day comes to reckon with your claim to the throne. The letter from France has become your most precious possession. In the quiet hours when the corridors are empty and the fire in your chamber burns low, you take it from its hiding place and read it again. The ink is beginning to fade slightly, but the words still strike like a bell in your chest. Remember me not as I died, but as I lived. You start to ask yourself what that life truly was. You know fragments, her wit, her skill in music, her sharp intelligence, but you want more. And you begin to notice that certain older members of the court, those who served in her household, have the look of people who carry unspoken memories. You learn to draw them out gently, never directly, but through shared moments, small confidences, and the careful planting of questions that seem harmless. It is in this way that you come to know Mistress Gainsford, once a lady-in-waiting to your mother. She is older now, her hair silver, her hands marked by years of work, but her eyes still hold a spark. You encounter her in the gardens one morning, the mist rising from the grass, and she bows with a formality that seems to carry more weight than mere courtesy. You fall into conversation, speaking first of the weather, then of the roses, then of music. When you mention that you have taken up the lute, her gaze softens. Your mother played beautifully, she says almost to herself. She could make a room go still with a single song. It is a small detail, but it feels like a window opening. You imagine her in a sunlit chamber, her fingers moving over the strings, her voice weaving through the air. For a moment, you can almost hear it. In the weeks that follow, you and Mistress Gainsford meet often, sometimes by chance, sometimes by quiet arrangement. She tells you stories in fragments, always careful to keep her voice low, always glancing over her shoulder. She speaks of your mother's quick wit, her habit of reading aloud from scripture, her skill at dancing. She tells you how your mother loved the color green, how she once tied a ribbon in her hair that matched the spring leaves, and how the king himself could not take his eyes off her that day. These are not the details the court records will keep. They are not the accusations or the formal charges or the proclamations. They are the living moments, the kind your mother wanted you to remember. One evening, as you sit by the fire in your chamber, you write them down in your ledger. You find yourself smiling as you do, though the smile is tinged with sadness. You realize you have begun to weave two stories together, now the truth of her death and the truth of her life. Both are yours to guard. The danger of this is not lost on you. The more you know, the greater the risk. You remember Catherine Parr's warning, truth must be taken and guarded. You understand now that guarding it means more than keeping it from enemies. It means keeping it intact, uncorrupted, ready for the day it can be spoken openly. Your thoughts turn often to your father. You wonder if he ever thinks of her, if he ever feels a shadow of regret. You wonder if he sees her in you, not just in your face, but in your voice, your bearing, your mind. And if he does, whether it stirs anything in him beyond unease. The season turns colder, and you feel yourself changing with it. You are still young, but you are no longer the girl who listened from behind tapestries, piecing together scraps. You are becoming a keeper of memory, a silent archivist of a truth the kingdom has tried to bury. One night, as snow begins to fall beyond your window, you close your ledger and place it back in its hiding place. You look into the fire and think of your mother's last moments, the calm, the courage, the words meant for you. You think of the life you have learned about the laughter, the music, the ribbons in her hair, and you whisper into the stillness, I will not forget. You don't know yet what shape that promise will take, but you feel it settling into your bones. A vow that will outlast this winter and all the winters to come. The winter deepens and the palace becomes a world of candlelight and shadow. Fires roar in the great hearths, their light dancing on the gold-threaded hangings. But the warmth never quite chases away the drafts that creep through stone walls. Outside, the courtyards are slick with frost. Inside, the air hums with the constant undercurrent of strategy alliances and the wary watchfulness that comes whenever the king's health declines. By now, you have learned to move through these halls like a shadow yourself, present but unobtrusive, polite but never fawning. You have become adept at hearing what is not said as much as what is spoken, and you have begun to realize something unsettling. The closer you come to understanding your mother's story, the more you see how her fate could have been yours or could still be if you make the wrong move. The court is not without its rare moments of ease. In January, there is a 12th night celebration full of music and masks with courtiers dressed in fantastical costumes. You wear a gown of deep crimson velvet, your hair adorned with a wreath of winter greenery. You play your part in the pageant, smiling when expected, dancing when called upon, but your mind is elsewhere. You watch the courtiers, how they perform joy, while their eyes are calculating how they move through the king's presence, as though walking on ice. It is during this celebration that a new fragment finds its way to you. A minor nobleman warmed by wine and the flattery of the evening approaches you during a pause in the dancing. He is a man you've seen before, someone of no great influence but with a memory for gossip that stretches back decades. Your mother, he says suddenly, as though the thought has just come to him, had a way of making the king believe anything, until the day he believed everyone but her. The words are tossed out like a careless jest, but they strike you hard. You press him lightly, feigning interest without urgency. And what was it that turned him? He chuckles, shaking his head. Ah, child, in this court it is not always the truth that matters, but who tells it. And there were many who wanted her gone. His tone suggests he knows more, but the music swells again, and he is drawn back into the dance before you can press further. Later that night, you write it down in your ledger. Many who wanted her gone. It fits with what you've begun to suspect, that her death was not solely the will of your father, but the result of a convergence of ambition, envy, and fear. You picture it now as a great wheel with your mother at the center, the spokes formed by the people who stood to gain from her fall. As the weeks pass, you continue your quiet work. You find ways to speak with those who served in her household, to listen to those who remember the days before her trial. Each memory is a thread, and you are weaving them together in your mind, a tapestry that is both a record and a shield. One evening you are in the library when a sudden snowstorm rattles the windows. The librarian, a man who has served in the royal household since before your birth, brings you a cup of spiced wine and sits nearby. He watches you for a moment before saying, "Your mother once read to me from this very book." He gestures to the volume on your lap, a copy of the Psalms. She said the words gave her strength when the court grew hostile. It is a small thing, but it stirs something in you. You begin to think of her not only in terms of her final days, but in terms of her endurance, how she must have felt the walls closing in, yet found a way to stand. Not long after, you find yourself summoned unexpectedly to the Queen's chambers. Catherine Parr is there seated by the fire with a letter in her hand. She waves you closer, her eyes thoughtful. "I have been speaking with those who knew your mother," she says, "not to dwell on the past, but because I think you should know that she was respected even by some who opposed her." She pauses. "That is a rare thing, Elizabeth, to be respected by one's enemies." The words lodge deep within you. They make you realize that your mother's legacy is not only one of scandal and tragedy, it is also one of resilience, of a presence that could not be wholly erased even by those who tried. That night, you take out your ledger and your mother's letter. You read them both by candlelight, the storm still howling outside. And for the first time, you feel a quiet certainty settle over you. This is not just a search for truth anymore. It is preparation. You do not know yet what the future will demand of you, but you are beginning to understand that when it comes, the lessons you have drawn from your mother's life and her death will be your greatest armor. And so you close the book, hide it away, and lie down to sleep with the sound of the wind in your ears, thinking of green ribbons, a lute's melody, and a woman who refused to bow her head until the very last moment. By early spring, the frost begins to release its hold on the gardens, and the first pale buds appear on the hawthorn trees. The air feels lighter, but the court remains its same dense weave of glances, whispers, and calculated silences. You have become so practiced in reading these currents that sometimes you know what will happen before the words are spoken. It is a skill born of necessity, honed by years of learning how to survive in a place where truth can be more dangerous than lies. Your father's health is failing more visibly now. He moves with greater difficulty, the weight of his body pressing heavily into the ornate cane he carries. The court, sensing the inevitable, begins to hum with speculation about what will happen when the throne is empty. For you, this speculation is not abstract. It is the air you breathe, laced with both promise and peril. You are not the king's only child, but you are the daughter of the woman the court has tried to erase. That fact will shape every alliance, every decision, every look cast in your direction. It is in this tense season that you receive an unexpected gift. One afternoon, as you sit in your chamber studying Greek, a servant you do not recognize delivers a small parcel wrapped in linen. Inside is a carved wooden box, no bigger than your palm, with an inlaid pattern of green and gold leaves. Beneath the lid, cushioned in folded cloth, is a ring gold set with a single emerald. On the inside of the band, engraved so finely you almost miss it, are the words, "the most happy." Your breath catches. You know the phrase at once. It was your mother's personal motto, one she had used in her letters and on her emblem when she was queen. The ring is warm from the cloth, but in your hand it feels like something pulled from another life. There is no note, no explanation, and the servant who delivered it is gone before you can question him. You lock the ring away with your mother's letter and your ledger, but you keep the image of it close in your mind. That single emerald green as spring leaves feels like a message, a reminder that her story is still alive, still capable of reaching you despite all the walls that have been built to keep it away. The next day you decide to visit the chapel alone. It is quiet there, the air cool, the light filtering through stained glass in fractured colors. You kneel in prayer, but your mind drifts. You think of your mother's courage, of the lives lost to court intrigue, of the way her name is still spoken only in guarded tones. You wonder if part of your future, whatever shape it takes, will be to restore her name to a place where it can be spoken without fear. It is during this visit that you notice an older woman sitting several pews away, her head bowed. She wears the plain gown of a servant, but when she rises, she moves with a grace that suggests she has not always been in such humble position. As she passes you, she whispers so quietly, you almost doubt you heard it, "She loved you." You turn, but she has already slipped through the side door. Those words follow you all the way back to your chamber. They are the simplest truth you have heard, and yet they cut through you more than any tale of politics or power. She loved you. It is the anchor in the storm of everything else you have learned, the reminder that beneath the weight of crowns and the swirl of accusations, there was a bond that no executioner's sword could sever. From that day, you begin to carry yourself differently. You are still cautious, still deliberate, but you allow yourself a new kind of confidence, not the brittle armor of someone hiding from danger, but the quiet strength of someone who knows her own worth. You start to see how others react to it, how they step more carefully around you, how they weigh their words. The court remains dangerous, and you do not fool yourself into thinking otherwise. But the pieces of your mother's story, the courage, the grace, the wit, the injustice have become something you can draw from. They are not just memories you guard. They are lessons you carry. And though the day when you will speak them aloud may still be far off, you can feel it moving closer, like a tide that cannot be turned back. That night, as you write in your ledger, you add no new facts, only 3 words underlined twice. She loved you. It is a truth as powerful as any you have uncovered, and one you will never allow to be taken from you. The weeks that follow bring the subtle but undeniable signs of a court shifting toward an uncertain future. Foreign envoys come and go with greater urgency, and the noble factions within England sharpen their positions like blades against a whetstone. You can feel it in the air, the anticipation, the fear, the calculation. Every banquet, every sermon, Every quiet conversation in the corridors is thick with the sense that something is approaching. You keep to your routines outwardly, the model of a studious and composed young woman. Latin lessons in the morning, music in the afternoon, needlework, or scripture study in the evening. But beneath the surface, you are still at work, your quiet, deliberate collecting of truth. The ledger in your chamber grows thicker, not just with memories of your mother, but with observations of the court itself. You have begun to understand that the two stories are intertwined. The court that destroyed her is the same court in which you must now learn to survive. One afternoon, while the court is lodged at Whitehall, you find yourself wandering the gallery that connects the royal apartments. It is a long hall lined with portraits of kings and queens, past their painted eyes following you as you walk. Most are distant ancestors, but then you come to one that stops you cold. The woman's features are unmistakable: dark eyes, high cheekbones, the faintest curve of a smile that suggests she knows more than she will say. There is no name beneath the portrait, only a small plaque with the words, "A Queen of England." You stand there for a long time, your fingers curled into your palms, aware that anyone passing might see you. You force yourself to move on, but the image is burned into your mind. That night, you sketch it into the margins of your ledger, a silent reclaiming of something the court has tried to erase. Not long after, Catherine Parr summons you for a walk in the gardens. It is early in the season, the hedges still bare, but the air is fresh, and the gravel crunches pleasantly underfoot. She speaks to you of your studies, your accomplishments, the impression you make on visiting dignitaries. Then, without changing her tone, she says, "You are your mother's daughter in more ways than one. You must be careful, Elizabeth. The court does not always know what to do with a woman of intelligence." The words land heavily. You know she means them as both a warning and an acknowledgement. You ask softly, "Did you know her well?" Catherine's pause tells you that the truth is more complicated than the question allows. "I knew her enough to see that she was formidable," she says, "and enough to know that such qualities are rarely forgiven." You carry that with you. It confirms what you have long suspected: your mother was not undone by weakness, but by strength. In the days that follow, you begin to test the edges of your own influence. You speak a little more boldly, in lessons pose questions that make your tutors pause. You practice the art of saying things that are true, but in ways that cannot be openly challenged. You are learning not only from your mother's story, but from the queen before you now, how to move through a court of daggers without letting the point touch your skin. One evening, as the sun sets and the palace is washed in gold, you take out the ring with the emerald and turn it over in your fingers, the most happy. You think about how those words must have felt when your mother chose them, how full of promise they seemed before the tide turned against her. And you realize that happiness in this world is not something you are given. It is something you must protect fiercely, sometimes in secret, until the day you can claim it openly. That night before you sleep, you add a new entry to your ledger: strength is not the cause of ruin. It is the reason to endure. It is a lesson you will carry into the years ahead, a quiet counter to the story the court still tells. And though you do not yet know when your moment will come, you can feel it drawing nearer, the way a storm builds before breaking. In the stillness of your chamber, you close your eyes and see her face again, not as she died, but as she lived. And you know with a certainty that steadies you that the truth you guard is also the truth that will shape your future. Spring deepens, and with it the atmosphere in the palace grows restless. The rivers run faster, the gardens burst into bloom, But within the stone walls, the court feels tight as a clenched fist. Your father's health is now a matter of whispered conversations in shadowed corners. You hear it in the hesitant way the servants speak his name, in the clipped tones of the physicians who come and go at all hours. The king is still formidable, but his body has begun to betray him, and everyone, friends and enemies alike, is quietly preparing for the day when the throne will be vacant. For you, that day means something very different than it does for most. To the courtiers, it is an opportunity for advancement, or a threat to be guarded against. For you, it is a shift in the ground beneath your feet. With your father gone, the last great barrier between you and your mother's memory will vanish. But so too will the shield that, however cold and conditional, has protected you from the court's full malice. Your resolve has hardened. You will carry her truth forward, but you will do so with the same care you have learned to use in all things care that keeps you alive. The more you think about her life, the more you understand that she must have walked the same tightrope, balancing wit with caution, ambition with survival. It is during these weeks that a rare opportunity presents itself. You are invited to attend a small supper hosted by one of the king's most trusted counselors, a man who has served through more than one reign. The gathering is informal, the company select. Conversation flows easily, and as the meal wears on, the counselor begins to speak of the early years of your father's reign before the break with Rome. You listen silent and attentive until he mentions the year of your birth. Those were turbulent months, he says, and his eyes meet yours across the table. I was present when your mother was crowned. She was radiant, brilliant in conversation. A queen who understood the power of her position better than many who came before her. The words are measured, but you sense there is more behind them. You incline your head politely, careful not to press too openly. After the supper, as the guests disperse, you find a moment to thank him. I have heard little of her coronation, you say. It must have been extraordinary. It was, he replies. Then, after a pause, remember this, my lady, greatness often invites envy, and envy is a patient enemy. The next morning you write those words into your ledger. Envy is a patient enemy. You think of all the forces that must have gathered around her rival's political opponents, those threatened by her intelligence or her influence. You begin to see her execution not as a sudden act of wrath, but as the culmination of a long, deliberate effort to remove her. A few days later, you find yourself in the gallery again, pausing before the nameless portrait of the Queen with your mother's face. This time you are not alone. Mistress Gainsford, your quiet ally, is standing there, her gaze fixed on the painting. They will not write her name, she murmurs, but they cannot erase her eyes. She glances at you, and for a moment you feel as though she has handed you something tangible, something you can hold. That night you think of the threads you have gathered, fragments of conversations, glimpses of memory, words meant only for you. You think of the emerald ring, the letter from France, the whispered truth from the woman in the chapel. All of it has built a picture that is now too strong to be shaken, no matter how the court might try. You know the time is coming when you will need to decide how much of this truth to reveal and to whom. You will need to weigh every risk, every possible consequence, and you will need to be ready not only to defend her memory, but to ensure that the story passed to future generations is not the one written by her enemies. As you drift to sleep, you imagine her walking beside you in the garden, her hand warm in yours, her voice low but steady. Guard the truth, carry it forward. You wake with those words still in your mind, the dawn light spilling across your chamber like a quiet promise. By midsummer, the air at court feels as though it could crack with the slightest pressure. The king's condition has become impossible to ignore. His steps are slower, his voice rougher, his temper shorter. The council moves in near constant session, their faces drawn tight with the knowledge that the balance of power will soon shift in ways none of them can fully control. For you, this tension is both a cloak and a cage. It hides your quiet search for truth amid the larger dramas of succession, but it also limits your movements. Courtiers are watching each other with a vigilance that leaves little space for private conversation. Even your walks in the gardens are shadowed by attendants and guards. Yet you have learned that information has its own way of finding you often in the places and moments when you least expect it. One of those moments comes during a summer feast when the air inside the great hall is thick with heat and the scent of roasted meats. You are seated between two foreign envoys, both eager to speak in halting English. In the pauses between their pleasantries, you catch a thread of conversation from the table behind you. Two older courtiers are reminiscing about the trials, and one says, "She could have fled, you know. There were ships ready in Calais, but she would not run. Said it would make her look guilty." You keep your face perfectly still, your hands resting lightly on the table, but inside something shifts. Until now, you have thought of your mother's final days as something imposed entirely upon her. The idea that she might have had a choice, even a narrow, perilous one, and refused it out of principle changes the way you see her. It deepens the respect you already carry, but it also sharpens the grief. Later in your chamber, you write the words carefully. She chose to stay. You underline them twice. That choice echoes in your mind for days. You begin to see it reflected in other stories. Subtle acts of defiance from women at court, moments when they refuse to bow entirely to the machinery of power. Catherine Parr herself shows flashes of it, speaking with a clarity that sometimes startles the men around her. You understand now that survival is not always submission. Sometimes it is the choice to stand knowing full well what the cost will be. Not long after you receive a summons to visit the Queen in her private chambers. Catherine is at her desk, writing by the light of a tall candle. She looks up as you enter, gestures for you to sit, and studies you for a long moment. "I have been thinking," she says, "about the kind of queen you might become." The words catch you off guard. She has never spoken so plainly about your future. You begin to reply, but she raises a hand. "If that day comes, you must remember two things. The court will test you, and history will try to define you. You must be prepared to answer both." She does not say your mother's name, but it hangs in the air between you. You nod, understanding her meaning as clearly as if she had spoken it aloud. That night, you take out the emerald ring and slip it onto your finger. It is too large, slipping down to your knuckle, but the weight of it is grounding. You stand before the small mirror in your chamber and imagine the woman who once wore it, not the queen condemned to die, but the one crowned in triumph who walked into the great hall knowing the world would be watching. You realize then that the truth you have been gathering is not only about her death or even her life, it is about the inheritance she has left you. Not jewels or lands or titles, but a kind of armor, the knowledge that a woman can endure the worst the court can do and still leave behind something the sword cannot cut away. And as the summer sun fades beyond the palace walls, you make yourself another promise. When your time comes to stand in the full glare of power, you will not only carry her truth, you will wield it. By late summer, the court is restless to the point of unease. The pageantry goes on banquets, hunts, dances, but there is a tightness to the smiles, a stiffness to the laughter. The king's physicians move through the corridors like shadows, and every foreign envoy seems to linger longer than politeness requires their eyes sharp with speculation. The knowledge that the crown will soon change hands hangs over everything, even if no one dares speak of it openly in the king's presence. You have grown used to this climate of watchfulness. In a way, it mirrors the quiet hunt you've conducted for years, the steady gathering of truth, the patient storing away of fragments. Only now the stakes feel different. You can sense that a turning point is approaching not just for the kingdom, but for you. It is on a warm, still evening that the most unexpected piece of your mother's story comes to you. You are in the gallery away from the crowd. When a man approaches a courtier you know only by name who served briefly in your father's household during your earliest years. His manner is hesitant, as though he has debated speaking to you for a long time. "I was there," he says quietly, "the day she was taken to the tower. Your breath stills, but you keep your voice steady. Tell me." He glances around, ensuring you are alone. She held her head high even as the crowd pressed close. Not a tear. Only once did she speak to tell the guard walking beside her that she trusted in God's judgment more than man's. He pauses, his eyes on yours. You have her eyes. When you look at people that way, they will either follow you or fear you. You thank him, your voice, even though inside your chest feels tight. That image, her walking through the streets, the tower looming ahead, settles into you like a brand. You have long known she faced death with courage, but now you see her in motion, alive in her defiance, her faith unshaken. That night, you write in your ledger, she feared neither the tower nor the crowd. Only God's judgment mattered. You realize this, more than anything, is the foundation she left you to measure yourself not against the fickle court, but against the standard of your own conscience. The following week, during an evening supper, Catherine Parr speaks with you again, this time with a candor that leaves no room for misunderstanding. Your mother's name has been used to frighten you, she says, but it should also strengthen you. If the court can destroy such a woman, then you must be twice as careful and twice as strong. Her words confirm what you have begun to feel deep in your bones. Your mother's life and death are not a shadow to escape, but a map to follow. She navigated this world as a woman of intelligence and will, and though the court brought her down, she left you the example of how to stand and why. You carry this with you into the quieter moments. Walking alone in the gardens at dusk, you imagine her beside you, speaking in low, measured tones about how to read a man's eyes before he speaks, how to tell when a compliment is really a warning, how to survive a room where every smile hides a question. You realize that in a way you have been learning these things from her all along, through the echoes she left behind in the people who remember her. The court will never give you the full truth in a single piece, but you no longer need it that way. You have gathered enough to see her whole, not just the queen they condemned, but the woman she truly was. And with that vision comes a clarity you have never felt before. You are not simply her daughter. You are her continuation. That thought is both comforting and dangerous. Comforting because it roots you in something stronger than the shifting allegiances of the court. Dangerous because it means you carry not only her legacy, but the risk that destroyed her. As the days shorten and the leaves begin to turn, you feel the weight of that inheritance settling into place. You are ready to bear it not because the court is less perilous, but because you have learned to move within it with her same quiet steel. Autumn returns with its golden light and crisp air, and with it the sense that the court stands on the edge of something irreversible. The king's absences from public appearances grow longer. When he does appear, he leans heavily on others, his face set in a mask of authority that no longer hides the strain. Those around him move with a sharper urgency. Alliances are sealed in private chambers, quiet promises exchanged in glances across the great hall. For you, this changing season feels like a narrowing funnel drawing you toward a moment you have long imagined, but never fully pictured. You know now with an almost physical certainty that when the crown passes from your father's head, the story of your mother will be one of the first tests you face. You have prepared for this in secret year after year, with every whispered memory, every careful observation, every scrap of truth stored away in your ledger. It is during this season that another thread of her life reaches you. You are walking along the outer cloister when a voice calls softly from the shadows. It is Mistress Gainsford. She draws you into a quiet alcove, her expression solemn. "There is something I have kept too long," she says, placing a folded square of linen into your hands. I was with her on her last morning. The cloth is pale, worn soft with age, and embroidered in one corner with a small green falcon, the emblem your mother used before she was queen. Gainsford's voice trembles as she continues. "She gave this to me when they came for her, said I should pass it to you when you were ready." You run your fingers over the delicate stitches, the work neat and sure. The falcon seems alive under your touch, its wings outstretched, as if about to take flight. For a long moment, you cannot speak. She told me Gainsford says that you would need reminders not of how she died, but of what she stood for. Courage, learning, faith, and the knowledge that a woman's voice, though easily silenced, can still echo for generations. The words settle into you with a finality that feels almost like a key turning in a lock. You understand now that the years of collecting her story were not just about uncovering the truth, they were about readying yourself to carry it forward. That night, you take out the emerald ring, the French letter, and the linen square, laying them side by side on your desk. Each one is a piece of her, a fragment of the life they tried to erase. And as you look at them, you feel the threads between her story and your own draw tighter until you can no longer see where one ends and the other begins. The next morning, the Queen sends for you. Catherine Parr looks tired, as though she too feels the weight of the shifting court. She speaks with unusual frankness. "You know the truth about your mother," she says, not as a question, but as a statement. "One day it will be used against you. They will twist it, soften it, sharpen it, whatever suits their purpose. You must decide now how you will meet that moment. You think of all the lessons you have learned, the patience to wait for the right time, the courage to stand when needed, the skill to turn an enemy's words to your advantage. You realize that the choice will not be whether to speak of her, but how. When you leave Catherine's chambers, the air feels different. Colder, sharper, but also clearer. You walk through the gallery and pause again before the nameless portrait. This time, you don't just see your mother looking back. You see yourself, years from now, wearing the same unflinching gaze. You return to your chamber and write in your ledger. Her truth is my crown before any other. You close the book knowing that the next chapter of your life will demand everything you have learned from her, her wit, her courage, her understanding of power's double edge. And when the day comes, you will be ready. Winter comes early, bringing with it a hush that settles over the court like a heavy cloak. Snow gathers in the courtyards, softening the sharp lines of stone and timber. But inside the palace, the air is taut with expectation. Your father's condition has worsened. He appears rarely now, and when he does, his once commanding presence is dimmed by pain and fatigue. The courtiers move with careful precision, each one calculating their place in the order that will follow his death. For you, the season feels like the crest of a long, slow wave. Everything you have been collecting, truths, fragments, memories, has led you here. You have learned to be cautious, without being timid, to read the smallest shifts in expression, to speak in ways that open doors without revealing more than you intend. Most of all, you have learned that power is not only in titles or crowns, but in the stories that endure when the people who lived them are gone. One evening, you sit alone in your chamber, the fire burning low, the wind whispering against the shutters. Before you on the table are the three objects that anchor your mother's presence in your life. The emerald ring engraved with "The most happy," the letter from France, signed simply Anne, and the linen square embroidered with the green falcon. Together they tell a story the court would rather forget. Together they remind you that your life has been shaped as much by what they tried to erase as by what they allowed to remain. You think of the first whispers you overheard. As a child, words like tower and condemned, that meant little then, but everything now. You think of the years spent piecing together her life from scraps, a compliment from a foreign envoy, a half-remembered song, a servant's trembling recollection. You think of the moment you understood she had chosen not to flee, that she had faced her death with unshaken faith. And now you see the through line clearly. She was not undone by weakness, but by strength, strength that threatened those who could not match it, strength that made her a target, strength that lives on in you. Outside, the snow continues to fall, muting the sounds of the palace. You imagine the day not far off, when you will stand without your father's shadow over you. On that day, your mother's name will rise again, not as the scandal the court has whispered for years, but as the truth you have carried and guarded. You take up your quill and open your ledger for what you know will be the last entry in this chapter of your life. In careful script, you write, "She lived with courage, died with grace, and left me both as my inheritance." You close the book, place it alongside the ring, the letter, and the falcon, and lock them away. The fire crackles softly. You sit back and let the warmth seep into you, feeling for the first time not only the weight of her story, but also its lift. It is no longer just a burden or a secret, it is a foundation. And as you watch the flames dance, you understand that the crown, when it comes, will rest on more than your head. It will rest on the truth you have protected all your life. You rise, draw the curtains against the night, and let the quiet settle around you. Somewhere beyond the snow and stone, the future is waiting, and you are ready to meet it. And so the story eases into stillness. You've been walking in Elizabeth's shadow, through candle-lit halls and frost-covered courtyards, through whispers that became truths, and truths that became a legacy. You've seen her as a child catching fragments of a forbidden name, as a young woman shaping herself in the image of a mother she barely knew. And finally, as someone who understands that her power will not only come from the crown she may one day wear, but from the courage she chooses to embody. It is easy to forget that history's most enduring figures were once small children, uncertain and searching. But Elizabeth's journey reminds us that the stories we inherit, whether spoken aloud or hidden between the lines, become part of who we are. Her mother's fate could have been a wound that never healed. Instead, it became a thread woven through every lesson, every choice, every moment of silence she turned into quiet strength. As the firelight fades, you can picture her sitting alone in her chamber, the ring, the letter, and the falcon laid out before her. The snow falls beyond the window. The palace sleeps, and in that moment, she is not only the daughter of Anne Boleyn, she is her own person shaped, but not defined by the past. And as you settle deeper into your own bed, the hum of your fan, or the soft quiet of your room filling your ears, you can let go of the weight of centuries. The corridors, the whispered conspiracies, the guarded truths, they all dissolve into a gentle hush. You've been walking alongside a future queen, but now it's time to close your eyes and drift into your own dreams, carrying with you just enough of her courage to warm the night.